Konnichiwa. Today we're going to talk about some questions that have been put to me by various people. A little later we're going to talk about the future of kanji in Japanese. And to begin with, we're going to talk about a word that causes considerable difficulty to a number of people, primarily because two of its most common meanings seem to be in complete contradiction to each other. This word is kagen. Now, if we look at the kanji of which it's made up, we'll see that they themselves are a kind of contradiction. The first one, ka, means addition or increase. The second one, gen, means reduce or diminish. So what do these two mean together? Together, they really make up what you might call the Goldilocks question. Is it too much? Is it too little? Or is it just right? So, for example, we may ask, Soup no kagen wa dou desu ka? What's the kagen of the soup? And that really means, is it too seasoned? Is it not seasoned enough? Does it go too far in any one direction? Or not far enough in any one direction? Or is it just right? And from this, we get expressions like shio kagen, which is the amount of salt. Is the salt too much or too little, or is it right? Mi kagen actually means seasoning, something we use to get the balance of the taste of the food right, something we use to adjust the balance of the taste of the food. Now when we hear this used in anime or manga, we'll often hear it used in the phrase ii kagen, which of course means good balance, good proportion. Now generally it's used in cases where bad balance or proportion is in question. So a very common phrase is ii kagen ni shiro, which is an order to have good balance. But what it generally means is cut it out, stop doing that, behave in a way that's moderated and balanced and not the way you're behaving right now. So that I think is fairly straightforward and obviously derived from the basic meaning of kagen. But then the other use of ii kagen seems to contradict this. If we say ii kagen na yatsu, we mean a sloppy person, a person who's careless. If we say ii kagen na genko, ii kagen na kodo, we mean irresponsible, loose, sloppy behavior or talk. If we say ii kagen na hanashi, the implication is it's a story that's been made up. Now it doesn't imply a carefully fabricated deception. There are other ways of saying that. What it implies more is that the speaker just said the first thing that came into her head without any regard for the truth. So this seems to be the opposite of what we meant by ii kagen before, and indeed it is. And this shouldn't puzzle English speakers too much, because it's an example of something that's much more commonly found in English than it is in Japanese, and that is irony, or in Japanese what we would call hiniku. When we describe something as ii kagen, most of the time we don't mean ii kagen at all, we mean warui kagen, rather in the way that when an English speaker said that's just what I needed, it very often means that's just what I didn't need. So once we understand that, it's not particularly puzzling, I think. Another use of kagen, which I'll find quite often, is te kagen, which means moderating one's hand. And what this means is going easy on someone, not just going in there full force trying to beat them in a fight or a contest or whatever, but moderating one's hand, going a bit easy on them. And you'll often find this used in the negative, te kagen shinai yo, which means I won't go easy on you, I'm not going to hold back. So that's kagen, and I think once we've understood the base meaning of the word, it's pretty easy to understand the others. The other question that I've been asked by several people recently is, are kanji going to last in Japan, or are they going to go away? And I've heard some people who really ought to know better talking about this as if it were a likelihood, and the arguments people make appear to make some kind of sense. The old Sinosphere, that's to say the area that's culturally influenced by China, that's China itself, Vietnam, Korea, and Japan, everyone except Japan and China itself have dropped kanji. Korean and Vietnamese used to use kanji in their writing, and now they don't. Vietnam uses a form of modified Romaji, and Korea uses Hangul, which is another phonetic system. Now, Japan already has 2 phonetic writing systems, so in theory it should be pretty easy to just drop the kanji and use the phonetic systems that they've already got. And then again, people will say that a number of Japanese people can't write a lot of kanji by hand anymore, and most Japanese people have kanji that they can't even recognize. Now, all this may seem fairly convincing, but actually none of it's very significant. The reason Japan hasn't dropped kanji the way Vietnam and Korea have is because kanji are far more integral and necessary to the Japanese language. As a matter of fact, the American occupation after the Second World War wanted to abolish kanji in Japan, and over time it became increasingly apparent that this was not a practical idea. One question that I've heard Japanese people ask in answer to this whole question is, would you sign a legal document written in kana alone? And very few Japanese people would be at all happy to do that, and that's because Japanese, in comparison to most languages, has a relatively limited number of possible syllables, which means it has a lot of homophones. So if something is written in kana alone, there's quite a lot of ground for ambiguity. Most Japanese people, if they see a whole text written in kana alone, don't want to read it because it's difficult. It's more difficult to read something written in all kana or nearly all kana than it is to read something that's horribly over-kanjified. And even I think most of you, if you're getting used to kanji, even if you still need furigana, you'd much rather read something with kanji and furigana than something in kana alone. Kanji are actually lodged deeply into the Japanese way of thinking. And as I've explained in another video, which I'll link here, lots of expressions that would be whole phrases in most languages, like a dog I love or bathing in the sea, are in Japanese what the dictionaries call a single word. But they're not really single words, they're somewhere between words and phrases. A dog I love or bathing in the sea isn't seen as a word by an English speaker, it's seen as a collection of elements that they already know put into an intelligible form. And that's exactly what a lot of these 2 and 3 kanji words usually are. They're usually on readings of words we already know, like love and dog, bathing and sea. And that's the way Japanese people think about them. That's the way you should be learning them. And that's what my video is about. Without kanji, this becomes much, much harder to visualize and probably wouldn't work at all. So kanji are fundamental to Japanese, and whatever anybody tells you, don't worry. They're not going anywhere. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments below, and I will answer as usual. I'd like to thank my Gold Kokeshi patrons, my producer angels who make these videos possible, and all my patrons and supporters on Patreon and everywhere, and everybody who supports this channel in all kinds of ways, subscribing, commenting, liking, and showing your appreciation. Also, sharing. If you like what you see here, please share it with your friends. It's your support, your enthusiasm, your love that makes this channel possible. And I'd like to thank you for attending this lesson. これからもよろしくお願いします。Class dismissed.